Hi, this is Mark Kemper with EMS, and in this video we're going to talk about the top 5 things you should look for when looking at getting product training, okay? And this is specifically around 3D scanning, dimensional inspection, GD&T, reverse engineering, things like that. Because training is the most important part of a sale, and we emphasize that to anybody who's buying products from us. You can't skip on the training. We spend a lot of time up front with them determining, what is the right amount of training, who's going to get trained, things like that, because it's so important. If you don't spend the time and the money to get properly trained, you end up not being able to do your job correctly. People get frustrated and leave, or they don't want to use the equipment you just spent a ton of money on. So training is very important, and we do a ton of training not only for our own customers, but for a lot of other people's customers because they didn't get good training. So again, we can't emphasize that enough, but we figured we'd put together kind of a top 5 list of the things you should look for no matter who you get training from. Because a lot of times the training offered is what I call widget training, right? So you go to class and you learn how to do stuff like this. Now that's fine, but in the real world, our customers are doing stuff like this stuff you see here. Very complicated mixture of solid models, surface modeling, hybrid modeling, or advanced GD&T inspection, multiple datum alignments, things like that. And that's the stuff you got to learn in the real world. So this video is going to go through the top 5 things you should look for, the questions you should be asking when you're looking at getting training, whether it's on a new product you just bought or an existing product that you want some, to be retrained or train additional people on. So we'll go through those top 5 things you should look for in product training.
All right, the first thing you should do when you are starting to think about getting some product training, whether it's for a new product that you're looking at buying, or maybe you want to do some retraining on some existing products. And again, this is all related to 3D scanning, products, and software. So really what you should do is have some initial questions you want to ask. And this should be done both internally and with whoever you're talking to for the training. So, the first question is, well, how many people need training? Because keep in mind, as the training classes get bigger, it gets harder to keep everybody focused. And I always like to say your training class is only as good as the worst person in the class. Which really leads into the second question is, what is the skill level? Is everybody advanced, or do you have some people that might be absolute beginners? For example, if you were going to be learning reverse engineering, it's really helpful to already know how to use 3D CAD. So if you have people that don't have any CAD or any computer background, and you have people that have been using CAD for years, that is going to be a challenging environment. And maybe that's, where you break the class up into almost 2 classes. So you have to think about that. How many people, and then what is their skill level? And then what are you training on? Is it both hardware and software, just hardware, just software, things like that? What is the location of the training? Is it going to be at your facility? Is it going to be offsite? Is it going to be online? And then what does the classroom environment look like? Is it a nice room with computers and a big projector, or a large TV? Or are you trying to do this out on the shop floor? So where you're going to hold the training. Preparation. What do the students need to do ahead of time? For example, if you're going to get into some GD&T training, would it make sense to have the students do some online, go watch some videos, read some books, things like that? Is there anything they should do ahead of time? Play with the scanner a little bit, things like that. How long should the training go? What is the length of it? Is it 2 days? Is it 5 days? Is it broken up into multiple segments? Things like that. And then what are you going to do to avoid interruptions? One of the biggest problems when you go and do on-site training, and even off-site, is, people are on their phone, they're taking phone calls, they're leaving to go do something, and that can cause real problems. So, you might want to make some rules ahead of time so you can avoid interruptions. And then finally, how are you going to measure the success of the training? How are you going to know that the training was successful? What factors are you going to use after the training to determine that? And you really want to set those up ahead of time. So those are just some of the questions you'll want to think about as a user and have discussions with whoever you're going to do this training with. Okay, so the first thing you really should look for is what is the type of training you want to do? Because there's really two major classifications of training, at least according to us. And that is structured training, and that can be done in a classroom, that can be done on site, or certainly a lot of people these days are asking and wanting to do online training. So, structured training is really more of following a curriculum, going through, very structured, different subjects, whether it's software or hardware. And there's some advantage to that. It's great for beginners that maybe know nothing about 3D scanning or reverse engineering. You're following along with usually curriculum, and you're, going step by step, usually starting with some basic, principles and things like that. Also, you're going to cover usually a lot of subjects or a lot of, different areas, let's say, of the software. It's going to be usually pretty broad based, and it usually follows a standard format. Now, what are the cons of structured training? Well, it tends to be generic. It can be very broad. You may not go into a lot of depth in many subjects. You're just really trying to learn the concepts of the different, things that you're going to go through training on. The other problem is when you do structured training where it's more of a classroom, you may be in that with, numerous companies. So that can make it hard sometimes if you're trying to want to work on, your own specific stuff. It could either be confidentiality issues or just that's not the structure of the classroom. So you can't work on maybe your specific challenges. If you have a varied background where, again, you have students that are just beginners versus people that have been maybe doing this type of stuff for a long time, that can be a challenge with the classroom and how the pace is set. If certain students are always falling behind, it tends to slow down the class. So that's really the type of training as far as the structured training goes. Now, continuing along on that is custom training. And again, that can be done in a classroom, that can be done on site, or it can be done online. Now, the advantage of custom training is it's usually laid out ahead of time, and it's very specific to a customer's need. So, the location of the training, how long the training, specific topics, what the user's levels are, that all can be determined ahead of time for that training. Typically, also, you're going to get into, more depth. You're probably maybe going to cover fewer subjects, but you're going to go into a lot more detail. Let's say, for example, advanced GD&T or advanced surfacing or something like that, because the customer's parts lend themselves to that. And that's usually done, custom training typically is done with customers' parts and data. Not all of it. Usually you start out with some basic stuff, but then usually you're going to get into their parts and their data. That's the whole idea of custom training. And it can be faster and more efficient. So, for example, a 5-day training kind of standard classroom might only be 3 days if you're doing it on site and you're doing it custom and it's very specific to their needs. Now, the only downside to custom training is it tends to be more expensive because it's usually one trainer with a smaller group of people. It tends to either be on site or online as opposed to a classroom setting where they're coming, to you. So that's the thing you want to look at. What type of training do you want? Do you want more structured or do you want more custom training? Next thing you should really look at is the company that's doing the training and the trainer. And those are kind of two separate things, but yet obviously they're connected. So what is the company's experience in the industry? How long have they been in the industry? Is it really their main focus, or is it just an add-on? Is 3D scanning, reverse engineering, inspection, is that really what they do? Or is it just another product in their line card that they do? And, what is their expertise? How long have they been in scanning, reverse engineering, inspection? How long have they been in this industry? Do they do it as a service? And why would that be important? Well, companies that tend to also provide engineering services like scanning and inspection, They tend to have a lot of real world experience. They've seen a lot of stuff, so they can usually get into far more detail and more specifics and more tricks and tips because they just know it. And that lends itself to the trainer as well. Many times the trainers have never even worked in the industry. They've just gone through training themselves and then they are training. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you just don't have somebody that, again, they can teach you the commands, but maybe they can't teach you the real shortcuts or really the best way to do some advanced surfacing, things like that. And if they've worked in industry, how long? And it goes back to, again, is it somebody that's just doing classroom training, following the book or the guides, or is it somebody that's, again, been in the industry and really knows what they're doing? And what do they do when they're not training? Some people, that's all they do is training. But is that engineer out working in the real world, doing real work, real jobs? So you want to try to understand that. You really want to know what the company's background is, and just as importantly, the trainer's experience. As you get into more advanced subjects and things that are more challenging, this becomes far more important. Next up, we want to look at the length of the training. And that is obviously dictated by what are you getting training on. So, for example, if on the hardware, is it just a 3D scanner? Is it also a photogrammetry system? Are you doing scanning and probing? What is the hardware? Is it a basic scanner? Is it more of an advanced system? Things like that. And then on the software front, is it just one product like a reverse engineering product? Or is it also an inspection product or an advanced surfacing product, something like that? So how many different software products are you going to be working on? And is it reverse engineering and inspection? Or is it some other things like GD&T or advanced surfacing or working with large point clouds or large data sets? So you really can't determine the length of the class until you understand all the hardware, the software, and really what the customer wants to get done. And does it make sense to do that training in segments? So, for example, maybe it's 3 days to cover the scanner and some reverse engineering, and then 2 weeks later you come back and do 2 days on inspection, and then a month later you come back and do some just kind of follow up and review. So, a lot of times it makes sense to break the training up into segments. It just could be overwhelming to try to do 5 days or 7 days in a row of training. So follow-up training is just as important as the initial training. It allows the user to get use the products, build up some questions, run into some challenges, and then have the trainer come back in and do a couple, maybe an additional day, or maybe that's online. So maybe the initial training is in person and then some follow-up might be online. Next, what about ongoing support? So you've gone through the training, and what about technical support after the sale? Okay. What does, the company offer to you? Are they really not going to take your questions and tell you need more training? And another thing is some companies charge for ongoing support. Now, a lot of systems, hardware and software come with 1 year warranty or 1 year maintenance. But some companies after that, if you don't stay on those plans, they won't basically answer your calls. So, that's something else you got to think about. Are they going to charge you for ongoing support? And I don't mean training, but the occasional call in, how to do something, things like that. And then, of course, you've got hardware maintenance. And what if you need retraining? Is that available? What is the cost? And if you're retraining them, why? Did they just... was the training good? Were the customers not paying attention? Did they have to cut the training short? So it's really after the training, follow-on support and service. Those are some questions you should ask. And finally, as we talked about at the very beginning, one of the most important things is how are you going to measure success? How are you going to know the training was worthwhile? One of the things is are you using the product on a regular basis after the training? If you're not, that's usually not a good sign. Either you bought a product you really don't need, or you just didn't, get trained well, or didn't pay attention, or didn't understand it, or the training wasn't correct for what you need. And if you're not using it, a lot of times that's because of the training. Are you getting the results you expected from the hardware or software? Is it the hardware or software limitations, or is it the user? It's usually the user They just don't remember how to do things. They didn't get trained on it, So how engaged are the users with the product after the training? Do you need more training? Now, needing more training isn't always a result of bad training. Maybe you've got some new people. Maybe the users just were, not far enough along to begin with, whatever it may be. But, if you're constantly coming back needing more training, then, there's a challenge there that, something wasn't right maybe to begin with. And it really leads into, was it the right amount of training? If you bought a 3D scanner, you bought a probe, you bought a photogrammetry system, you bought reverse engineering software, and you bought inspection software, and you only went through 3 days of training, that's a problem, because that's at least 5 to 7, maybe 10 days of training that really should be spread out over time. And was the training a good value? Again, structured training is usually going to be cheaper than custom on-site training. But if you can do it faster and your users get up to speed quicker, is that a better use of your money than going through kind of a structured classroom with other students and coming back and really just struggling with the product because it really didn't teach you the things you needed to learn? So you really want to look at how you're going to measure the success after the training to make sure it was worthwhile. So what does EMS offer? Well, we can offer you both structured and custom training, but our real emphasis is on custom training, and that's typically done online or on-site. And why we do that is because we have just found it's the better way to go. When you get into some of these advanced subjects, it's harder to do this in kind of a generic class where maybe you have multiple companies in. We like to define an in-depth agenda and goals with the customer up front so we can measure success with them. And all of our engineers work in the industry. Our trainers are not just trainers. They are all engineers, and they do scanning and modeling and reverse engineering and advanced surfacing and GD&T and inspection and all types of stuff with all types of equipment, scanners, probes, trackers, long-range scanners, you name it, we use it. And we've been doing it for 22 years. So we just have a ton of knowledge. And it's more about, it's much more than just teaching how commands work. It's how to use them. What's the right way to use stuff to get your job done? The tips, the tricks, the little shortcuts that you typically are just not going to find in a manual or a structured class. And again, we're very focused. Some companies sell all types of products and services. All we do is 3D scanning, reverse engineering, and inspection. So we're very good at it. And we offer lifetime free technical support. Whether you stay on maintenance or not, we're going to answer your questions. If you call up and you need to, I can't remember how to do something, we're not going to retrain you and spend hours on the phone, but we're happy to answer any questions you have. We don't believe in charging for ongoing support we want you to use the products and be successful with it.
So this wraps up the video on the top 5 things you should look for in product training. And again, it's specific to the 3D scanning, inspection, reverse engineering market, but it probably applies to a lot of other things. And we've been in business for over 20 years doing just this. So it's, we have a lot of knowledge, and hopefully you learn from that. Whether you're going to get training from us or somebody else, hopefully you can take a look at these questions and ask, internally in your own company, and whoever's going to be doing your training, go through this stuff and make sure you're preparing yourself so that you can get the best training. Now, if you'd like to talk to us about training, you can reach us at 877-845-2700. Or also in the description below is a quick link you can fill out, and we'll get in touch with you. Regardless of whether you bought products or software from us, we're happy to train you, really have a detailed conversation about what products you're using, what applications you have, and really put together some in-depth training to your specific needs. So again, this wraps up the video on the top 5 things you should look for in product training.